photo with anybody who'd like to be in it, and then we'll start in and just have a nice discussion amongst ourselves. So please come on board if you'd like to be in the photo. Maybe we could have somebody set. Would you be able to make that for us? Sure.
Around the piano?
Yeah.
You want to be
Yeah, this would be a nice shot. Former mayoral candidate. You gotta be here.
Right here.
Nicely dressed. Girls, see, everybody here. I teach for a living.
Yeah, they're pretty much sums it
Mr.
up.
Politician. Come on up here.
Anybody else want to be in the photo?
Well, we would have liked to have been.
William?
All right, you want me to stand behind you?
What a great idea.
I'll do that. I'll do that.
Thank you.
I'll follow.
There you go. Now, you get in the middle. Sorry. Here, you come on over here.
Everybody.
Such a small, delicate flower.
Yes, I know.
Well, looks you're pretty aiming, huh? I think Seth is going to stream it, as a matter of fact, yeah. Two streamings?
It's streaming right now,
We're
actually.
going to bring down the internet. The world of photo ops, huh? Well, thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. So, first of all, thank you all for coming tonight. I think we did do all the things right today to really set things up for 2040. So I'm kind of calling this Plattsburgh 2040, doing a little bit of a reprieve of Vision 2040. And I want to have a little bit of a dialogue with you, because ultimately, if we're going to have a really vibrant community in 2040, it really begins with making some decisions today, having a fully engaged community today, and then moving forward. So I'd like to put a few provocative ideas out there for you, and then really spend the half an hour or so just discussing some of your ideas, some of your hopes, and some of your dreams for Plattsburgh, not only today, but how it might affect our kids and our grandkids. But before I begin, let me first of all thank Patty for making this space available to us. You know, Patty and Harry and a number of us served on the county legislature for a number of years. We had a really great time doing, did a lot of good work, and it's really nice for Patty to be so close to my local business as well, just up the street. And these are the types of shops that really make the downtown Plattsburgh vibrant. These are the things that are going to attract people, the young people who we hopefully will get to live. I worry a little bit about city finances, and let me explain why. I think I have a little brochure, a little handout that I can give to you. I'll keep a couple of those for the people up here. City finances are precarious, and they have been in the past, but they're especially precarious right now. Now, I have to give a lot of credit where credit's due to the former mayor, Donald Casper's Act, who built up a pretty sizable budget or a fund reserve balance, about $6.8 million just a few years ago. And city finance experts will tell you that you really want a little bit of a fund, but think of it as a savings account in the bank of around 30% of your budget. If you think 30% of your budget, that's really only about 3 or 4 months of payroll in advance. Make sure you have in the bank for the unexpected things. And I'm going to describe to you why that really matters if we're going to have a sustainable community. But as you can see, but municipalities just simply can't borrow in that way. We have to borrow at a project-oriented basis. We can't simply borrow because we haven't done a job balancing revenues with expenses. So the first foundation we really need to shore up and worry about is getting our city finances on a firm footing, reestablishing a little bit of a comfortable fund balance, so when those unexpected things like the south end pipes breaking come home to roost. We actually have something, a little bit of a latitude to deal with it. Another thing you've seen that I've taken up as an issue in this campaign is we've been forced to give dramatically lower assessments to some very large out-of-state corporations like College Suites, Imperial Mill out of Main Mill Street. Even more recently, a couple of the malls in the area. We've had to lower their assessments dramatically because it turned out we owed them money and we don't have money to return to them. So instead we offer them 5 or 10-year sweetheart deals, we're lowering their tax rates. And of course, any one of you would love to have the same sort of treatment. And we're seeing more and more people now lining up for these lower assessments. So we really can't let our fund balance and our budget get to the point where we're starting to make desperation decisions just merely to keep the payroll going. That's something I will work on, is sustainability of finances. The next thing we need to do is, I really believe strongly in long-term planning. This exercise tonight is what we imagine Plattsburgh can be in the year 2040. It begins now, 15, 20, 25 years out from that point. Let's start putting the foundations in place. You know, some native talk about making decisions for the 7th generation down the line. I really believe in long-term planning, not just 5 years like we often do at the county, but 10, 15, 20 years, 20-year road plans. We know that every 20 years, each road is going to get some attention. We don't leave a really strong future for us. Now, many of you who are at the Vision 2040 discussions, we focused a lot on demographics. If you recall, the demographic picture for Clinton County is increasingly aged, and the reason is, a lot of people as they age decide to stay here. It's a very wonderful community, but we have a real hard time those kids and grandkids that go somewhere else, maybe go to school, maybe go for more opportunities. We need to get more people like that back. And things like the new Norse plant is a really good start. It's a way to bring new people into our community, and if we can get more of those individuals to actually live in the city, perhaps over the storefronts, that'd be a really great opportunity for our community to create that vitality and fill out that kind of population and period that's right now dominated with more retired folks and less young people. So it really begins with attracting the young people as well. And the other thing I hear as I knock on doors is grandparents want to and ask me to figure out ways to get grandkids back here. It's a sensibility problem. They realize that the sensibilities of that next generation are a little bit different than we want. We're just grateful to be here. We're grateful to have great jobs. We're grateful to be in the part of the community, the world that has such natural beauty around us. But we need to also have the sensibilities of the young people we want to attract. And what do the young people want when they come here? Well, they want the coffee camp. They want a place to come and feel like they're with friends almost. Listen to some music. They want maybe a wine store. They want a great place to get a haircut around the corner. They want a bagel pit. They want the Strand Theater. They want music in the park every summer. They want a different set of different package of things that we really haven't put much thought into in this community until relatively recently, when some young people said, geez, this isn't here. What can we do about it? Let's create that community for ourselves. We really need to unbridle that group of young people, the millennials and maybe a little bit older, that really want to do incredible things. Let's create a path for them to do this in the community. So how do we get there? Well, I think we need to just think about it a little bit, ruminate on this a little bit, figure out, first of all, are there things that we can do as a community? And then we need to educate. And education is really important. It's not only educating ourselves about all the possibilities, but it's using our education system as a way to inform and educate that next generation that will be in our shoes 20 or 30 years down the road. So education is important. We need to implement that plan. Incredible things. We've got more options now than we perhaps have in any time in a lifetime here. But we need to seize that opportunity and do it our way, not ways based on consultants from outside that don't understand necessarily the nuances of this. Not make some of the mistakes we have in the past by assuming that we'll just build it and they will come, but really engage the public in doing things with a Plattsburgh stamp on it, just like we saw in Burlington, where they've done things with a very much of a Burlington stamp on it over there. So I believe we're really up to this, but I'd like to spend the rest of the time tonight hearing if you are too. What are your ideas? How do we pull this off together? How do we get everybody to engage and then re-engage again? How do we keep people drawn into this process here? So this isn't just 7 people sitting in a room somewhere making all these decisions. This is an entire community doing this for us. So those are kind of my words for tonight. I'd like to have you all help kind of moderate a little bit of a discussion, hear your ideas, and what we can do together. And no matter what happens, by the way, as you know, the election's over in 1 week. Thank God. Everybody who's run for office knows how I feel. These are very long processes to get there. Whatever happens next week, our community is going to live a lot longer than any one of us. So what can we do after the election together to really make for a great, vibrant community? It's not just one person that's going to do that. What was it Hillary said? It really does take a village to pull this off. So let's open it up. What are your ideas? Where do you think the community can go? What are we capable of? What are our next steps with the DRI? And what are some of the things that you'd like to see downtown and in the surrounding wards to really revitalize this area? We've paid for a lot of consultants to come up and do it, so I'd like to really hear your ideas. Pat, do you want to get things going?
Well, I've been downtown for 20 years now, and, you know, there was a hotel that was going to be built, and I want to know if you were elected, what you would do to, I think the timing is right for a downtown hotel, and if you would use part of that money as a feasibility study, or, you know, really try to capture a hotel on the waterfront down here, possibly a convention center. And then I think with the airport, the Strand, and a hotel, those 3 things combined together would help with the vibrancy of downtown.
You know, we do have a cluster of hotels in the city or in the town, but you couldn't really imagine any more of a sterile place to put them all, right? What are you going to do in those hotels? You're going to go out, eat at a chain restaurant, and go to a Walmart or a Target. But you've all been to conferences. There's not too many better settings for what we can imagine downtown. But that's going to, you know, I would not want to see, obviously, a city-run hotel. So the city's not going to build a hotel. We know that. How do we then get a developer to actually invest the 20, 30, or 40, or $50 million into our downtown to do it? I don't think too many are going to come until we show the pride of our downtown for them. We're going to need to do a little bit of sprucing up. We're going to need to start filling the storefronts, fixing the streets. And some of you have heard me say before, I think we begin that by actually working on the 2nd and 3rd floors. And what I mean by that is we can create a vibrant, year-round group of people that live downtown who really insist on things like coffee shops and new places to go for dinner, new places to go to appreciate the arts like the Strand. If we can create a real downtown population, then I think we go a lot farther. Right now, the population tends to be relatively transient. A lot of students live downtown. Some of the areas above the shops aren't very nice apartments. Let's fix up what we have. And if we can fix up what we have, spend maybe $1 million doing the revitalization. You remember back 10, 15 years ago under Dan Stewart and Clyde Rabideau, to the point where people really want to and are clamoring to live downtown. Then we're going to see the storefronts come in again. And then we're going to see a developer say, I want to be part of that. But I don't see them wanting to be part of that until we solve some of these problems. But I think that's just kind of seed money. We don't need to spend a lot of money solving it. We just need to kind of get that going. Use maybe $1 million or $2 million in revolving grants that will eventually be paid back to fix up a lot of these places downtown, fix up those streets, do the facades, etc. And then I think we can really make a good case for downtown development. When we do that, though, let's try to think of it not as in somehow concentrating activity all in one new hotel complex, because we really have to, if we're going to have buy-in and get the businesses to participate, we need to spread that activity around, all the way around downtown and beyond. And I talked at first about setting up a triangle, but I actually like the idea of a four-sided quadrangle. One center would be perhaps Trinity Park and the Memorial Park and the traditional city center. Another center would be the lakefront. People clamor and they say, let's use some of that DRR money to give us better access to the lakefront. And of course, many of you know there's a footbridge that could take you to the lakefront. Another center might be the Durkee Street plans that they have, where it'd be a logical place for a hotel to perhaps go someday, or some sort of mixed residential commercial place. And then if you think about it, the Oval isn't very far away, but it seems like a long way away just because you can't kind of get there from here. So let's build a trail where people can really get back and forth to the Oval. This is the fourth end of that quadrangle. And if we could do some public-private partnerships, how about even a fifth end? People say, let's do more things with the Crate and the Crate Center and the beach. Well, what's the problem with the Crate Center and the beach? Everybody says, well, I have to drive in my car and go there, and it seems kind of isolated. I'd love to someday see whether it seems to make sense to build a boardwalk between downtown and the Crate Center. It's about a mile and a quarter. It's something that we couldn't pay for with public funds necessarily, but with grants and private money, I think that's feasible. So we've got kind of 5 areas where we can develop, and we need to really think about moving people back and forth amongst the downtown rather than just simply imagining concentrating everybody at one place.
I have for 6 years wanted to have a boardwalk from end to end, not just a little piece, the whole piece. But everything that we have tried to think about to do has one huge problem blocking it. And ironically, when it was built, that was a super solution. Having the railroad tracks right here in the middle of it so that all of the businesses could use it was woo-hoo, 2 thumbs up. But now what would be really great, I have a big dream. If we could convince a whole bunch of people to get together with this one, if you take the railroad track from where it is roughly at Georgia Pacific, put it onto the Northway, circle it around, it can then become a hub, a transportation hub at the airport, where we could have the train station, we could have a real live bus station instead of having to sit in other things waiting for a bus to come. And the airport's there, so we could have parking. We could even get Homeland Security to put one place there that does all of the touristy things for crossing the border. We could probably get whole bunches of people to buy into it, and it would free up our whole entire area down there. Which would really then let us put a one little train that could go tootling along the whole thing, stopping at different places to pick up people, to take them all the way to the Crate, or all the way to whatever else is going along the boardwalk.
And I think that
But
fits
the
really.
railroad has to come out.
I think that fits in really well with the plans for the airport as well, having a hub there where it's now multimodal, all in one location. I've seen estimates of moving the train tracks, rerouting them along the Northway right-of-way. It's expensive, $35–40 million. But I believe that that would be a tremendous value. Imagine if there was ever one accident with a train and one of the oil trains downtown, $35 or $40 million would have seemed like a bargain all of a sudden.
I was going to say, a lot of people are hesitant who are along that stretch for that very reason.
Right.
Those trains that come through are kind of scary.
They are, and this is something that I think a mayor can do. Obviously, train traffic is a federal jurisdiction. We found that out from the oil train task force that Harry and I have worked on. But what a mayor, I think, does is 40 hours a week, they sit in their office and they do that kind of taking care of the city stuff. Another 40 hours a week, they're using their kind of bully pulpit to put ideas out there. So every week or two, we put that idea out there. How about CP Rail? You consider moving those train tracks. Another week, hey, CP Rail, we've been talking about moving these train tracks. Keep that dialogue going, and I think eventually we'll get their attention. And I think we can make a good business case for why that would make a lot of sense for CP Rail, for the city with kind of a tourist, kind of a train going back and forth instead of a large train carrying freight and oil. And it makes sense also for the county as well, because now we've created a multimodal hub out at the airport. So I think it's a great idea. I don't think that's at all beyond the realm of possibilities. It's been explored before. That's where I've seen that number. So we've thought about this before. We just haven't, like a lot of things, we haven't gone beyond that plan that's sitting on a shelf and actually trying to implement it.
And that actually frees up the 2 beaches that the Air Force had. Because right now you have to go over that horrible bridge to get to it because of the railroad. So
Right.
you wouldn't have to, and those beaches have held up nicely.
And you
There's
know,
a whole lot down there.
when we put railroad tracks and garbage dumps, etc., on the lake, that was in an era 50, 100 years ago where people naturally put their back to the lake and looked out inland towards the mountains. Now we're reorienting, turning around, we're wanting to look at the lake, so now we have to do things a little bit differently. Obviously, someday between now and 100 years from now, the sewage treatment plant isn't going to be there either. What that date is, I don't know. It's obviously going to be expensive. My estimates are $30 to $50 million to move it. It would give us a much better sewage treatment plant when we do that, though, state of the art, that works in a symbiotic relationship with wetlands in behind Georgia Pacific. So it will happen someday, there's no doubt about it. The only issue is when. So why don't we also sit down and start figuring out what that when will be. But even in the meantime, you know, the single most important, most popular state park in Manhattan is Riverbank State Park, built over a sewage treatment plant. Nobody knows there's a sewage treatment plant underneath. There's playing football and enjoying concerts and enjoying, there's trees, large oak trees planted above this thing. Maybe we couldn't afford to do that completely, but there's also covers we can put on sewage treatment plants for odor control and for methane regeneration. So it actually runs on the methane gas it's generating, becomes quiet, it becomes odor-free, and we put a wall or facade around it to make it actually look even somewhat historic. So there are things we can do even with the sewage treatment plant.
And if you get it down to where it's gray water, it's actually sellable as rented acreage to grow crops in.
Sure.
So we could have our own farm down
And a
there.
green roof, that wouldn't be fun. And now you might say, well, some of these ideas we're talking about seem a little bit far-fetched.
They're
Yeah, maybe they are, but
done
let's
it
put
on
them
Long
on the
Island
table.
now for the past
Yeah.
20 years. We're behind
There's only
times.
20,000 people in Plattsburgh. There's 10 million in New York City.
Right. But we never know whether these ideas are far-fetched or not until we sit down, kind of do the analysis, walk the ideas through from beginning to end, and then at the end we decide, yeah, we can do that one, no, that one really doesn't make sense. We need to take these ideas, put all the ideas on the table, do the thorough analysis, and then make the decision of what makes sense or not, or what doesn't make sense today, but might make a lot more sense 30 years from now. So that's the kind of analysis as a community I think we could actually do.
Was the boardwalk out to be proposed several years ago? The property owners along Upper Market Street, among others, objected. I like that idea myself. There was an idea of a floating type boardwalk was one proposal. Now, maybe there's other version than what you're thinking. But wasn't there some objections by these property owners on Upper Market Street? And what other, are you aware of what I'm talking about several years ago?
Sure, and there's also all kinds of private-public partnerships talked about with developing a lot of the property on the former city dump. Also something we put along the lake at one point. But I think we could do some designs, see what people think about it. I understand that the city does actually have a right-of-way along that area, but we do have to work out at some of those details. So again, not an idea we should necessarily pursue, but at least an idea, like many of these ideas, that's worth sitting down and exploring. Good point. Bonnie?
I think there are a lot of things that can be done right now without great studies to make the downtown a place that people would like to be a lot more. One is to make it, we stopped this, it would be nice to be able to spend an afternoon or a day downtown in any season except, maybe the absolute worst weather. There are some big anchors. There's the public library, which is doing more and more things for families. There's potential for really nice recreation area, not only way down at the lake, but in the parks we have where Trinity is and things like that. It should be possible to go downtown and maybe if there's any public activities in the summer or even indoors, different shops, to go maybe to the co-op, which could perhaps absorb some more activity with supports. This is the first time that it's really gotten it, where you could go eat, then go shop. That's wonderful for people with small children, because they can sit down, a couple of people get together when somebody sits with the kids, and then adults take their turns shopping. There's space between the downtown and the lake where you could have nice family housing, ordinary family housing that's affordable, but that could be redeveloped for some, where families could live comfortably. Nobody wants to, I think a young family with a couple of little kids probably doesn't want to go up and down to the second floors on Vincent Street. But there is space for family housing. And if there were some transportation from different parts of the city, so that suppose you don't live right downtown. I lived like 3 blocks from the downtown for many years, and then the place was closed. But it would be nice for somebody to be able to come, to get some transportation, to come to events, we'll say at the Strand, or in the summer outdoors. But if you came in the winter to the Strand, you wouldn't necessarily want to have to be waiting outside for a half an hour for everything to synchronize. There needs to be ways that people can go downtown and enjoy being down there, and I think that's very easy. I think downtown businesses could get together, possibly support certain kinds of transportation with some state grants. I think there could be incentives for the kind of housing that might make families live close enough to the downtown, not necessarily in it, where they would walk downtown if they wanted to go out for dinner or do something. And people, we shouldn't keep talking about how much money everybody spends when they come downtown, because people have to spend money. And we want the downtown to be a place, I think this is selfish, where people will spend money in accordance with their budgets. So a family, a young family that's coming downtown to spend the afternoon might, do cheap things. There's a museum for children, but you don't want to park and drive here and then drive there. There are things to do. You can do that right away.
I think you raised a number of points. Let's start with some of the simpler ones that we could easily implement, and then move to some of the more difficult ones I still think we could address. There is a lot of low-hanging fruit with the activities that we have downtown. And this isn't the same sort of experience you're talking about as if people are going up to the mall. You're really talking about slow shopping.
Yeah.
People spending a whole afternoon or a whole day downtown like they might have done 30 or 40 years ago before the mall phenomenon. If I go to the mall, to be honest, I want to get in there and get out of there as fast as I possibly can. But I'd like to spend a day downtown. Now, our business is right next to Trinity Park. We see all kinds of stuff happening. I can promise you that the nonprofits would be happy to put something every single weekend in the park if we just make it easy for them to do it. So you could rely on every Saturday afternoon something cool happening downtown and doing that slow shopping experience. But you also talked about affordable housing. And that's actually a bigger challenge in the city of Plattsburgh than we might imagine. Now we've all lived here for many years, so we're kind of like that frog in the pan that the water's getting warmer and warmer. We don't quite realize it. The tax burden, the property tax burden to come and move to New York State in general, but Plattsburgh and a few other cities in particular, is actually a pretty big burden for young families. And if you look at the median household income in the city of Plattsburgh, compare that to the median listing price for available houses in the city of Plattsburgh, the property taxes alone are going to take up 16.9% of your income. The average for the country as a whole is 3% of your income. That's a ratio of more than 5 to 1. We have to deal with and make sure we have affordable housing for these young families to come. Now there is housing, but there's not a lot that's affordable. But we do have assets. That we have the Plattsburgh Housing Authority that can help us, and we've got a very creative director that would like to figure out a way to have a mix of affordable housing and professional housing downtown. So there's things that we can actually do to work on the housing issue as well, but we can't leave that dimension out. You raised the issue of transportation. The Clinton County has a great bus system. The university also has a bus system. We just need to make it kind of connect a little bit better and follow routes that actually work for the people that need to get to their jobs and get to the places they live. To me, that's just a coordination problem. We may need to add a little bit more resources to make this happen. But the city of Plattsburgh, the town of Plattsburgh, the university, the community college, and the Clinton County all have that same interest in mind. Let's start working together a little bit hand in hand to see if we can do a better job with that as well. And you also, finally, you said, some of this is just conceptual. How do we start talking with each other so things flow a little bit better? Why go to the Strand on a cold night and wait half an hour outside before you can go in? These are just communications issues. We just need to get our city working a little bit better to pull those off. So I think a lot of the things you said, you raised some big issues, but I see them as a lot of them are actually very solvable if we just sit down together and work out some of the kinks. We just tend to not do that. I find it ironic that, and actually Clinton County does a good job in collaborating because they have to work with all the various supervisors across the entire county, but Clinton County's offices and the City of Plattsburgh offices are only a block apart. I think those two entities should almost be joined at the hip, and while we're at it, join Beekmantown and Peru and the town of Plattsburgh at the hip as well. Let's start working together, because in reality, the entire county depends on the success of the city. We go nowhere as a county if we don't have this city, the only city in New York State for 100 miles, if we don't have this treasure functioning here, we can't do much as a county. And of course, the city can't do much if the county also thrives. So we need to recognize our interrelationships and start working more completely together. And I really think that that's pretty easy to do. It's just we haven't done much of it up till now. Good points.
And, thinking of what Plattsburgh needs to prosper, I think you're right, we have to consider what's the county need to prosper, what do our neighbors in Canada need to make them want to come down, and what do we have to offer people to come to Plattsburgh? And one of the problems with Plattsburgh is we have geographically a very confined downtown. Right now, it pretty much extends from Law Street to about Cornelia Street on Margaret, and maybe as far up as Oak. So what can we do to fill those buildings with businesses? I mean, it's a good thing to say, yes, we're down here to eat and do some shopping, but what shopping is there to do down here?
The United States has 100% more retail space than the next country. That's when the economy. So to consider filling space when the internet and eBay and Amazon are taking up business, I wouldn't expect it to happen. I'm just saying.
Yeah, but there's two types of shopping, right? There's the getting your basic needs met, and then the slow shopping where you really do want to spend an afternoon sitting in a seat. So I think we can actually do that. And by the way, the confines you mentioned of that kind of center city, Broad and Cornelia and Oak Street, and right down to the lakefront. At one time, by the way, I look at old maps. From here to the lakefront was just at one time chock full of stores and shops and interesting things to do. And now it's kind of an empty stretch. We can start rebuilding and filling some of that in. But I think we need to go beyond just those boundaries, because the old base has an awful lot to offer. The north end of town has a lot to offer as well. We need to think a little bit more geographically dispersed and start working on that. And the DRI actually, it said at first we proposed to limit it only at the downtown core, but they're flexible enough to allow us to start exploring and start connecting the various parts of the city. We can't simply work on a city core. We need to figure out how to spread people around. Now, I bet you a lot of you have been to Philadelphia. I love going to Philadelphia because I can't walk for more than 50 or 100 feet without hitting a historical sign. And I just find that fascinating. I'll stop at every one. You don't want to go to Philadelphia with me because it takes me, 30 minutes to walk one block. I need to read every sign. We have that kind of history here. We were the crucial battle points for the Battle of Plattsburgh, for the War of 1812, and for the first Battle of Independence. This is right chock full of history. Maybe Bessie Smith's cow knocked over a lantern and burned down a building. So I want to know these things. So we actually worked with the Historical Society, and we identified 50 historical locations on a walking tour, and we translated a little narrative in English and in French, because I think our Quebec visitors are just as interested in that. We got a grant from the county to put these signs out, and we reached some obstacles with the city. They said they wouldn't let us put the signs up. Well, why not? I think that just those signs alone would probably increase tourism by 5 or 10% at least in the downtown core over a few years. And 5 or 10% of, say, 60 or 80 or $100 million is a lot more economic activity, and a lot more sales tax revenue is going to come to this area, which will turn out to be a very good investment for the county to put in the first place. So there's lots of really cool stuff we can celebrate here. It's not only just kind of mall-like experiences. There's things that we can really do that's really unique to the city of Plattsburgh with all its history. We just have never really celebrated it in the past like a city like Philadelphia does. So I think we're really capable of doing that, and then creating these walking tours, getting people to start flowing all the way from here to the Oval, to the museum complexes, down to the lake, maybe even out to the beach someday, and start connecting through our history and through signage and trails. I don't think that'd be that difficult to do.
Stand here so people can hear you. I had accosted you on the street about the issue in the Strand. You know, the federal office building that the Strand took over that has art galleries and classrooms has terrible leaks in the roof. If you go on the second floor, anybody in here can go in there and see the damage. It's significant. I think time is running out to fix that. The thing is built out of concrete and rebar, and when the rebar rusts out, we're in big trouble. The people who have expendable income have given their money to the Strand Theater. It's not finished yet. The people on the board of the Strand want to wait until the Strand is finished. They have to put a carpet upstairs, a few more things. But why not use some of that grant of $10 million to fix the roof? It's less sexy than building a parking garage. I know you're not in favor of a parking garage necessarily, but that Strand Center is an economic engine. It's proved its potential. The Strand can be as successful in its own way as the Flynn Theater in Burlington. It's shown that any of you want to see the producers, it was filled for 3 nights with people. And this was locally produced. So there's great potential there, and just you need to fix the roof.
And you know, that's a really good analogy to, in the city, we just need to have that mentality. We know the roof needs to be fixed. We know some of the streets need to be fixed. We know we need to spruce things up a little bit. If we don't take care of these problems in a timely manner, they fester, they become much more expensive, and we depreciate some of these assets. And that's where planning comes in. Anybody who looks at the Strand and does a long-term plan, the first thing they realize is we're going to need to fix the roof. So let's use that as the symbology for the city in general. Let's fix some of the things that we need to fix. Let's decide what we really want as a city, focus on those things that are really important to us, maybe stop grabbing at some of the bright, shiny objects that people dangle in front of us, and work on the roof, work on those foundations, because if we don't have that, we're not going to have much left, or it's going to be much more expensive to fix later.
I'd just like to agree with the gentleman who spoke about the roof. We have the $10 million, and I think the worst possible thing we could do with that would be to build one structure or 2 structures. The best things that have ever happened in the city, as far as I can tell, happen organically. So if you take a place like the Koffee Cat here, they didn't get a grant. They grew because there was a need and people wanted them. And my take on that is, if you took that $10 million and divided it up into 100 chunks and did 100 projects with it, such as fixing the roof of the arts center, then you'd have something. And then you would have something that was sustainable. Everybody talks about the mall in Burlington. and it's nice. But what we don't realize is now it's about to go into its, I think, third iteration. And each one of those iterations cost about $50 million. And, you know, we don't have that money, and we don't have the money to maintain and sustain that kind of facility over the long term. But we do have the ability to take what's good about this city, which is the core of downtown, and do some wonderful things with it. I would say, well, I have a picture at home hanging on the wall of what Plattsburgh looked like at about the turn of the century. It had these big, beautiful, wide avenues, you know, but the city ended it about Beacon Street. So what that meant was that downtown was extremely dense, like a large city. And as you were saying, there was a lot to do here. And it also meant that the housing in near the downtown was very valuable, and it wasn't broken up into several apartments and that kind of thing, because it was frankly just too valuable. Now, I think we can get back to that. I think that the best thing that we can do is think about how we used to be, and for the future, let's go back to that. This is a beautiful, beautiful downtown area we have here. Let's let it continue to grow, and let it grow organically the way it always has, and it's going to be fine.
You know, one of the other ideas you have with, I like that idea, let's do 100 smaller projects rather than one big project. Now, all of you know when I say give you an example of what's happened when we've depended on somebody, probably from the outside, because nobody has the deep pockets within this community to put in 30 or 40 or 50 million dollars. We depend on somebody from the outside to build it and they will come. You all know what we're talking about. They never build it and they will come. We depend on one person. Here we depend on 100 people. We get buy-in from 100 people. 100 now devoted small businesses that put their heart and soul into trying to make the city a better place, rather than somebody who lives in Syracuse who just figures if it doesn't work over here, well, I've got an option to build a property over there or there or there or there. For us here, this is special. We need to tap into the nonprofits and the private sector that's already here, that's determined to spend the rest of their lives here to forge our future, rather than simply hope that somebody else is going to sweep in from outside and do it for us. Because man, every time I think of an example of that, it hasn't worked out very well for us. So let's do some homegrown solutions. I like your idea of a number of small projects that are homegrown, rather than just rolling the dice and hoping that we have that one big hit, which almost invariably, in my experience, tends to fail here. Yeah.
Is that going to be an option for that 10 million?
It is.
10 million can be used that way?
The 10 million is far more flexible than we thought at first. What the state wants us to do, they recognize there are a few communities that are just going to need a little bit of a nudge to be able to get going again. Ours is one of those communities that we're fortunate enough to get that nudge. They just want us to succeed. Now, we proposed a plan, and there's an awful lot of buy-in. As a matter of fact, that plan that we proposed had been shopped around town for about a year before we even knew the DRI existed. So we were kind of wed to this idea. We pitched that idea. They said that they would fund it. And now that they're here, though, they're saying, you can consider a lot of other different ideas. You don't need to do this one. Also, you don't need to rush in and do it. They said their exact words were, don't take 5 or 10 years to spend this money, but you've got a lot of time to contemplate. So let's use that time and get all the very best ideas. And I think in this case, maybe a couple of larger ideas, but a lot of small ideas I think are going to be our best option. Let's not put all our eggs in those 1 or 2 Syracuse kind of baskets. So we do have that flexibility, and the DRI told us so. And actually, some of the people in the room were surprised when they heard the consultants say that we have that flexibility.
Colin, could you tell us what the difference is between the current mayor's idea for the money and yours? For those of us who don't know or might not know, where do you differ on how that goes to downtown?
Well, some of you may have been at the Downtown Association meeting when the current mayor, about a year and a half ago, came and presented his plans to us, and you've seen it in the paper. It involved the Durkee Street parking lot, removing 380 spots from the Durkee Street parking lot. We have to replace that with a parking garage because we do recognize that parking is a shortage downtown. So they're going to replace the 380 spots with 320 spots in an above-ground parking garage. The cost of parking garage spots are about $20,000 per spot. So 320 times $20,000, that's $6.4 million there. Create a park structure and then build the infrastructure to then have a developer, an outside developer, come and put in this large complex. So that was how the DRI proposal was pitched. Now I think that, to be fair to the mayor, he is backing off from that proposal a little bit. I would take a different approach though. I would sit down, first of all, without a great deal of preconceived ideas, and ask the public what we think we could get buy-in and what we could do together. And it might be an element of some of those ideas that the mayor's been working on, but some other ideas that you've talked about. Now, if we were to redevelop this area on Durkee Street as park, because after all, it's right on the riverfront, it'd be part of the Saranac River Trail, that would be a very nice park area. I certainly agree in that concept. I don't want to put a parking garage there. If we needed a parking garage, wouldn't we want it to not be in the corner of downtown, and be more central downtown? Actually, right across here, the Cumberland Hotel. That'd be a great place for a parking garage. You might say, well, no, that's way too small for a parking garage because it's only a small block. But what if we built that parking garage from the wall here all the way across to the county building, right across Court Street, and have an entry to that parking garage off Margaret Street and off Court Street? Or maybe even the parking garage could be a partnership with the county, where the county has parking for their employees and visitors. So yeah, maybe we need a parking garage. I don't know. Let's put that on the table. Let's decide where it ought to go rather than where a couple of people decided it ought to go, and then work those details out together. So I think there's elements of those plans that could work, but I don't think I'd want to accept that plan until there's an awful lot of your ideas in the mix as well. And you'll know me, I mean, I'm an economist, I'm a planner. I believe what we need to do is get a lot of ideas on the table, do the analysis for each one of those ideas, and then see which ones have the most benefits at the lowest cost, do the benefit cost analysis, and then decide, yeah, this, and this project works, rather than, hey, that's a pretty good idea, let's run with that one. Too often we get an idea and we just run with it, rather than doing the thorough analysis and compare it to all the various alternatives. Harry.
I was just going to say, I think the most encouraging part of the first meeting was the fact that we did have a wide set of parameters. I would encourage, we've had 2 public hearings now, I would encourage all of you to go to those meetings also and have input, because there's nothing said. I agree that I think the mayor has, I think he felt initially that maybe we were in a situation where we were stuck with what the application was. Sometimes on applications like at the airport, we're not going to have those kinds of parameters if we end up getting a grant. This we did. So, and I think there's tremendous openness on the part of the committee, but I've heard some great ideas here tonight. And I would encourage you, if you haven't been, I've seen some of you at those meetings, but to get to those meetings, there's at least 2 or 3 more, and get your input in, because that's what we want to hear. I'm a tabula rasa here. I don't have any preconceived notions. I live up in Rouse's Point. I'm on the county legislature, but I've been put on this committee. I've been up here 50 years. I started school about 50 years ago at Plattsburgh State. I love this community, and I'd love to see the downtown again come back. So that's the goal, and hopefully we can do that. Hopefully you guys will bring some of those ideas to that committee, because that's where the decision is going to be made.
And thanks, Harry. Harry is a member of that commission, and him and I were both at that meeting where they said there's actually a lot more latitude for what you want to do with this than we initially thought. So let's use that, use the time to come up with some of these plans. The other thing I like about your statement, Harry, is that you live in Rouse's Point, and you still value what's happening in the city of Plattsburgh. I mean, this is the cultural, the entertainment, the slow shopping hub of the entire region for 100 miles, at least in these directions, maybe not in that direction. So, yeah.
I could guess
going along the same thing that Harry said, I'm also from Rouse's Point. In fact, I live about 3 houses down from Harry. I'm in Plattsburgh every single day, whether it be working here, at school, and you just mentioned something that I love to key in on. You said specifically that this area is essentially a hub. You know, we have Montreal right ahead of north of us. We have Vermont east of us. I think pivoting off the downtown part and focusing on the airport that we have, one of the biggest resources that this area has. It's one of the biggest civilian airports in the country. How would you tap into this resource and further cultivate this to, essentially let everything trickle down and eventually prosper here, not only downtown, but just bring more infrastructure to the city?
You know, many of you were probably part of the whole process for the Destination Master Plan a number of years ago. And that's, again, one of those plans that's a great plan, all kinds of great ideas, but primarily is residing on a shelf somewhere. We're not following through with a lot of the investments it encouraged us to do. It recognized the great asset that Clinton County Airport is, and that with Kathy's idea, also having a multimodal hub out there as well, which could then also feed people into the downtown. But we usually view that airport not as a place where people come to Plattsburgh, but a place where people leave Plattsburgh to go elsewhere. I'd like to see it bi-directional. And in the Destination Master Plan, they talked about communities like in Virginia and Maryland that are destinations in themselves that have less histories to celebrate than we do here. Where people buy in, where people are wearing the costumes on the summer days, where people are doing the reenactments and the boat building and the battles and all that kind of stuff. I could see this as actually being kind of a cute tourist destination. So let's use that airport 2 ways. Let's be bringing people from Florida up here instead of using it as an opportunity for people to go from Montreal to Florida, because it's a great service from Montreal. I like being Montreal's southern U.S. suburb, all that kind of stuff. But I'd really like people to view this as a destination, not as a jumping off point. And I think we can do that. The Destination Master Plan, I think, was very interesting, has all kinds of aspects. We just didn't follow through. Now we've got this $10 million. If we only took $1 million of that $10 million to really invoke some of the things in the Destination Master Plan, like a maritime pavilion, like some old boats that are built by craftspeople around the world that will come here, that will pay us to come here to build those boats for us because they're retired and it's so neat a project. We could do some really cool things downtown along the lines of Destination Master Plan with a fraction of the $10 million we have available to us. Now, a lot of that is just not even expensive, it's just cultural. Can we get the mindset and the attitude to start wanting to do this? Can we have the cheerleaders to keep pushing us in this direction? I think we actually can.
I was just going to say too, obviously tying with a lot of what we're talking about and bringing people here, that exactly there are events that go on that people don't know about, a lot of stuff that we've kind of found out about last minute, and one that comes to mind is the International Film Festival, which is coming up soon, which we saw a poster cut just in passing the other day downtown. And last year too, it was, I think the day before, we said, oh, and I mean, I read the Press Republican, I hadn't seen anything about it, nobody else at my place of work knew about it, so things like that, which we went and had a really great time, and it was a very impressive film festival, and yes, I think it's surprising in Plattsburgh, and then unfortunately it was well attended, but I think it would have been better attended if it would have been more publicized. And even again, speaking of Montreal, you know, my connection to Montreal, that there are a lot of young people who would come to that. There's obviously film programs and CEGEPs that might have come for a field trip. It's not far. They come for a day, catch a few films, obviously, and yes, hopefully take advantage of the other things. So to really get the word out about that there are events here, really interesting things that go on, and unfortunately the community itself often isn't aware. As I said, when I talk to the people, work friends, just people I know around the neighborhood, aren't aware of these things. So yes, signage and getting some publicity for what is going on here.
And you know, our best ambassadors for all the really cool things that are happening, and there are a lot of really interesting things happening in Plattsburgh, but we don't hear about them because we're not tuned quite to that frequency. I call it tourist eyes. If you come and move here, you're looking to have stimulation. You want to be glad you came here. So you're looking in the newspaper, oh, there's an event over here, there's an event over here. Most of the people that I see come to the various events that we, for instance, have at 30 City, are people that are relatively new to the area. The people that have been here for a long time, they'll come and they'll happenstance to come to one of these things and go, I never knew about this. But the new people have already tapped into it. So sometimes we just need to look at our own community with fresh eyes. Some of you maybe have seen me write about, I call it tourist eyes. If we could look at our own community with tourist eyes, wouldn't we look at it very differently? And by the way, one of the infrastructure projects I'd love to see happening with some federal grants or some state grants for the state highway coming into town, Route 3. That's one of our first entrances into the city. Now you're all used to it because you travel up and down that road twice a day often, every day, 365 days a year. So we've become kind of out of tune with what that experience looks like. But if you're a tourist driving down from the interstate into the downtown, what do you see? You see a pretty rough road. You see a lot of wires going back and forth and telephone poles. What if instead we saw no wires at all? They're all underground. If we saw kind of a boulevard, if we saw some charming houses on both sides that exist, but we're distracted by all these other nuisances. So imagine that mentality. Every time you drive, think of it with fresh eyes, as if you're moving or driving in a city that you've never been to before, and you're attuned to what things look like, and then all of a sudden we start saying, yeah, I bet you we could do something over there and over there and over there, relatively inexpensively, to really make these things wonderful. So I think that's just looking at things with fresh eyes will actually give a lot of that to itself.
Someone wrote a comment here on our Facebook Live, and I wanted you to weigh on it. They said that we need attractions for all seasons.
We do.
So what can we do during the winter time, especially? I mean, we don't have a very good skating rink around here, for example.
Parking lot.
Yes, exactly. I've been advocating, actually took the highway oil site until we do something else with it. It's probably got a pad underneath of it. Let's just make a little kids park there. Not a big skating park, something like half the size of Rockefeller Center if you've ever been down to 30 Rock in New York. Just something you can do in the wintertime with your kids, have some hot cocoa maybe at the co-op, etc. That'd be something easy to do. But the other thing is, let's celebrate winter. When I moved here, I actually moved from Fairbanks, Alaska. One of the first people, by the way, I met when I moved here was her. Fairbanks, Alaska has a lot of winter. It's 68 below, maybe winter's about 6 months long. So you learn to thrive in that. Our winter's a little bit shorter. As a matter of fact, they thought they could easily attract me here because they marketed it to me as a climate improvement. Not too many places can be marked as a climate improvement. Coming from Fairbanks, it was. But we did all kinds of stuff in the winter. I love the ice sculptures that we do. Saranac Lake does a lot of stuff in the winter. The ice sculptures and the forts and all that kind of stuff. Couldn't we do that here? Easy things to do. Quebec City, many of you have been there. They do all kinds of remarkable things there as well. There's a lot of things we can do in the winter if we just stop suffering winter and start embracing winter instead. And again, that's just a cheerleading thing. There's nonprofits, the Kiwanis and the Lions and the Rotary groups that will do all this for us. We just need to sit down at the table with them and say, come on guys, let's work on this together. We're going to remove every obstacle, but we want you guys to do some cool things in the winter. And I think people are going to come out and do this stuff for us.
I just wanted to guess in your comment about having first-person interpreters on the street. We have a wonderful Battle of Plattsburgh commemoration. It's one weekend. Unfortunately, it comes after school starts, but it's big crowds there. But this could be done. Have a small group every weekend, all during the summer. I've been up to Canada. They do this regularly up in the Canadian cities.
Yep.
And it's easy to do. So thank you for that. Yes.
And it also gets the nonprofits involved. I get kind of leery with the model of having government do all this for us. I want government to enable the nonprofits to do this. We had very vibrant Battle of Plattsburgh activities when we had the booths running it and all kinds of people joining it. They had a team of 100 people to put on the Battle of Plattsburgh. Now, we all recognize that a lot of them retired and said, listen, I just need to pass this on. And we didn't work hard, I think, to create that groundswell of people to replace them. So the city kind of said, well, we'll take it over. But it's never going to substitute for 100 passionate people working on this. Think of all the retired people that will be willing, when I retire, I'll put on one of those suits and spend a day every weekend greeting tourists downtown. That'd be a lot of fun. Hire a few high school kids to act as interpreters. That needn't be all that expensive, but I think would be almost an instant hit if we just do that well. We don't need to spend a lot of money on it, we just need to do it well.
I really appreciate you being very concerned about the budget and the reserve fund and fixing the deficit. And I know it's always a big political fight, you know, trying to tighten the budget, you know, the budget belt, as they say. And so I just want to pose this question. I mean, you know, no one likes taxes. I mean, we all hate taxes. We hate taxes. We hate when taxes are raised. But it's important to maintain a budget and keep it, you know, very viable. So, you know, well, I'm just going to pose this question because I've thought about this, but you know, it's one of these things like, I think there are people who are a lot smarter than me that could come up with reasonable ideas. How can the city government create revenue without taxing people? And how can we expand that? We have a planning department. I imagine the person gets paid pretty well. Why don't we think about expanding like how we can create revenue without taxing people, so we can keep our tax, at least maintain our tax level, or you know, our tax rates right now where it is, and not have to raise it, but being able to balance our budget and provide for all the you know, commitments we've already said we would be committed to with former workers and current workers.
I think we have to do a couple things. First of all, we need to really decide what we want city government to do for us and have the discipline to not do a lot of the less central stuff. Because we need to preserve, we need to be kept safe, we need to have good first responders, we need to have roads and pipes that we can rely on. So we need to really decide what the core function of government is. Then the other things that we additionally do, we need to create a business case for them. If we want a community development office, which I personally believe in, what are our goals with that? How much do we expect it to bring in year 1, 2, 3, and 4? A good community development office should bring in 5 to 10 times as multiple in additional grants and revenues. But if we don't have a 5-year plan, if we're not tracking that and engaging expectations, we just fall back into complacency where it just becomes one other job rather than a revenue generator. Now, we've all thrown a lot of different ideas on the table tonight. Let's throw a lot of different ideas on potential revenue generating ideas for the city as well. One idea that I've talked about with the fire department is having more ambulance services, because they recognize they can't keep up with all the calls, so they call in other ambulances from other areas, which is great for the other ambulances, but nobody's going to get to a city address quicker than one of our 2 fire departments that are already right down here. So let's see if there's a business case to generate more revenue. They estimate we can generate about $800,000 of revenue from additional ambulance. Now their total budget is only about $3.2 million, so a quarter of their budget could be paid for by having another ambulance. I don't know if the economics is there. Let's put that on the table. Let's put a bunch of ideas on the table. 10 or 20 or 30 ideas, do the business case for each of them, and then do the 5-year planning. Okay, you said you're going to generate this revenue. In year 1, was that revenue generated? In year 2, in year 3, here's the various bars. That requires long-term planning. And I don't see that we've had the discipline in the past to treat things as an economic study. We just simply spend a little bit of money and then hope and pray everything works out. But if it doesn't, well, now we're kind of stuck with it. And we've been seeing our wages, our wage bill, the number of people we've employed going up and up and up. But I don't think too many of you are saying that you're seeing an awful lot more services for it. So I think we need to do the hard-nosed analysis and have those 5-year expectations. And if we do so, I bet you're right. I bet you there's going to be lots of revenue opportunities that we could properly cultivate, but we need to devote that attention to each one of them. Great idea. Any other ideas?
We have another population that often doesn't utilize downtown as much as elected to, and that's the 5,000 students who are at SUNY. And we're lucky with SUNY here in Plattsburgh because this college campus is right integrated into the city. There are many places where if you go to the SUNY campus, it's way out of town. Tim was saying that there were years when he would tell the students about, for example, about Plattsburgh, and talk to them about the following building, other than no one was there.
Yeah.
They never wandered downtown except to go to the bars. So, you know, if there were more things downtown beside the bars to get the students down, they would become more integral into the community.
I agree. I sometimes ask my students, have you ever seen the city in daylight? No, only at night. But you know where I think that begins? It actually begins with the faculty. If we can get the faculty fully engaged in the downtown, I believe the students are going to follow. And a number of faculty are engaged in the downtown, but there's other things we can do. And we've gone through eras in the city where the city-college relationship has been much tighter. Now, we fell into a little bit of a rut in the Judson era, and we kind of moved away from the Burkes and the Angels and the Warrens when this community was knitted much more tightly together with the college and community experience. And another thing I think would help is, some of you may know, I worked with Tom Moran to start up what we call the Center for Public Service, where the whole idea was to get faculty engaged in community affairs. Because after all, we're not just simply teachers, we're supposed to be teachers and scholars, and we're supposed to do service to a broader community. I consider my broader community service to be the city and the county, not service to my discipline or service to do some workshop in Atlanta, Georgia or something. My service is right here. And that's not going to be for all faculty, but I bet you it's for some faculty. And where I really see it is the young faculty. Like Anna's supervisor, Kirk Jervich, he came here relatively recently. He's itching to get involved. We just need to give him stuff to get involved in. And with him is going to come Anna and all his other students into the downtown. They're going to want to get involved in rebuilding the downtown. They're going to want to get involved in civic affairs at the college or at the city hall. They're going to want to get involved as a strand and in the culture. So we need to cultivate that. Right now, we've almost got some sort of invisible firewall between the two with a little opening when the bars are open. We need to rip open that firewall and really engage. And you all been to university communities. You know what, to be honest, one of the things that really attracted me here is I said, boy, the city of Plattsburgh has a college right in its heart. I want to really live in another college town. Now, when I got here, I discovered there were these firewalls, but I'd like to break them apart and be like a Geneseo that has a very well-integrated college and city atmosphere. You've all been to towns like that. They're vibrant. Their coffee shops are the place where people hang out and talk about interesting things and hear really rich music. We can do that. One other idea I have for that, though, is I want the college to have some sort of presence downtown. Maybe just a small little storefront where they could have lectures. And I would like to bring my students downtown for lectures. Now it's finance and economics. I don't know if it might be very interesting for people in the community, but I would invite them to come in and audit or sit in a class at any time. And let's have public talks and presentations. Some of you know that we do a Science at 30 City gathering every 2 weeks where faculty come in right downtown and give talks on interesting scientific subjects. Let's do a lot more of that cross-pollination. I just think we need the college to be nudged downtown. I don't think it'll really be hard. It's just we haven't done that for a little while. But I think once we start doing it, and once we start getting over that intimidation factor, then I think it will thrive. Now you might say, well, can't the community just go up to the college? No, the community feels intimidated going to the college. We know our way around the college. We know where to park. We have the parking stickers. We know what all these buildings mean and everything. But the average community member doesn't necessarily have that. So let's bring the college to the community rather than expect the community to simply partake in the college.
And one of the really nice ways that can be done is through various churches in the area. Because if they were willing to host some of these, they have the facilities, they have their churches, and their places where they meet. So they have automatically have a place where
And you know, again, it's low-hanging fruit. I'd say 80% of the stuff we've talked about tonight could happen in a year or two, couldn't it? None of this is all that difficult. It just requires us to think about things a little bit differently. Very few of these ideas cost any money. There's just requires cheerleading and groups to push it on, and we need to just get out of our seats a little bit and make it happen. So I think that it's very, very easy to do. And I think that so many faculty and students and community members would be very appreciative if we could somehow bridge that divide a little better. Lonnie?
Yeah, when I hear the different points of view, I'm thinking that what Tim was talking about earlier, especially fixing the roof, and what Mike was talking about, so we're coming up with lots of different projects. There's a real difference in emphasis. Those projects, fixing the roof, doing lots of things where there are people ready to use them, and I will put in trying to find places where people who are moving to the downtown can live close to the downtown, not right above something, but where you can walk. Those are projects that immediately have an effect on the people who live here in the city and accessible to the city. That's very different from the tourist mentality, trying to make this a tourist destination. I think that's what leads to the waste of money. That's what leads to thinking you need parking before you have the thing you're going to park for. First you need the thing you're going to park for. There's a lot that's accessible. There could be little transportation from the lot to the downtown if we became so crowded. Right now that lot is totally empty.
Yeah.
So I really think that we need to emphasize finding out what people who live in the community want. And it won't be only by having hearings with people like myself who like to talk to us. I think we're going to have to go to the schools, to where parents are, to where people live, and talk to them.
I think it's hard at first to engage people, but it gets really easy after you do it for a little while. But think of all the various ideas that we had here. And let's say only half of them ever find the light of day, and the other half just won't work for one reason or another. If we did only half of the stuff we talked about tonight that we thought was reasonably feasible, if we did that downtown, I think we would then be having developers clamoring to come. We don't need to build it and try and entice them to come. They're going to want to come if we do all these other things. And if we don't do all these other things, I think we're going to have a real hard time getting them here in the first place. So I think it really begins with all these ideas. And then we can start building on that rather than simply putting a lot of money into something and keeping our fingers crossed.
Piggybacking on your idea, the developers come in, I live at Set Point, they're not concerned about what they're building across the way, that the prices are, the starting prices for housing is $289,000. Is that going to be another just a building, nobody moving in? I can't believe it's down that much. And who's going to pay it? I mean, who's going to live there? And is that realistic for our community? And do you know the latest of the project? Do you know
I think that from what I gather, what happened there is that we went with a developer that really didn't have the financial resources to make it happen. So they did a lot of the stuff on that site to make it look really bad. It's going to take quite a while longer for them to mobilize the funds to start making it look good again. So I'm kind of worried about that. There's a classic example of, oh geez, here's somebody coming down the pike to fix all of our problems. Let's let them do it and then hope and pray everything works, rather than working hand in hand in a partnership to really have a workable plan out there. So I don't think in that case, I'd rather not even start until we know we can finish it. Because there's nothing worse than being halfway through a project and then running out of money. And as you probably know, they ran into asbestos problems. Well, it shouldn't have been rocket science to figure out there might have been asbestos problems. Why did we find that out once we already ripped out all the trees and ripped out the yard and ripped out the facings, etc.? Why didn't we already have a fully developed plan before we jumped into it?
I
Again, poor planning, I think.
Why didn't we let them rip it out first?
Well, I wasn't mayor, so I didn't know
But
that.
what's missing in the city that we allowed the project without the full plan?
Right.
That was here. I don't know, I mean, who knows?
I think is just a kind of a wing and a prayer kind of planning. We just didn't really have a full baked plan. We didn't have the resources in place to go from beginning to end. And we got ourselves in a bind again.
We didn't have a Democratic mayor.
You know, I might just close by saying, when we found out about the DRI resources that were becoming available to Plattsburgh back in early May, some of you were following our Facebook page at the time where we simply said, let's have a virtual town hall and let's ask the people what kind of ideas you have. We had, in the space of a week or so on that virtual town hall, about 150 residents comment. And of course, when somebody comments, they have a whole series of replies. These were like multi-tiered discussions on what we could do. A lot of them talked about better waterfront access, etc. But really the point is, it's not hard to ask for people to get engaged in a process. We're doing it tonight. We did it with the virtual town hall. It seems to me that we can use technology in town meetings and gather people and empower people and include people really at low cost, really easily to do so. And when we do so, I think we're going to have far better results than that previous approach where we just get a few well-intentioned people to sit in a room and then decide for us all what they're going to do, roll out a plan, and because we weren't really part of it, all the best we can really do is say, well, that looks like a nice plan, but we don't have the buy-in, we don't have the participation, and we don't have all the fresh ideas that we get when we kind of crowdsource this kind of stuff. So this is the kind of approach that I think a community of our size can make better use of, and I'd like to see us do a lot more of this kind of stuff because it's not very hard to do. We can leverage with technology. Some of you have probably heard that when I'm mayor, what I'd like to do is make sure every important meeting is accessible by people, either there or at home even, using the internet. Not as one way, but as two way. It's easy to do Google Hangouts discussions where people can participate. If they're in a wheelchair somewhere, they can still participate in dialogue and community building very easily. And I'd also like to have more frequent meetings, more meetings that last longer with more thorough discussion, not this bang, 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 resolution, blah, 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 blah kind of approach, but actual discussion. And I'd like to have people come to those meetings and ask us questions. And not have us say, well, thank you for the question, next person please. I want you to expect answers from your elected officials. Let's have a dialogue with the people in the room. Let's view this as a dialogue. Let's view this as a telephone rather than a megaphone, a two-way communications. And I'd also like to make sure that no telephone call to the city hall ever goes unreturned. Maybe you won't always have your answer that day, but you'll always know when somebody's going to call you back with a firm answer in the future, because a lot of people share with me a frustration that we almost feel we're working for City Hall rather than City Hall's working for us. So this inclusion and participation isn't difficult. We just need to start thinking about things in a different way, but I don't think it's a very big leap to get from here to there. Any final closing comments? Well, I really appreciate you all coming out. This is what it's all about. This is what makes it fun for me. This is what gives our downtown and our city the lifeblood that I think is going to move us forward. So please stay engaged. Tell your friends to get engaged. And I think if we all do it, I think we all can recognize we can make a real difference together. So thank you. I'd be happy to chat with anybody afterwards as well. Thanks very much for coming.